Happen, but shortly I'm going to introduce our panelists, two of whom are here, and one, as I said, as Greg has quite highlighted, one is here in spirit. Then we'll begin our discussion, but how the discussion proceeds to some extent is determined by you. You may participate by sending in text messages via the number provided on your outlines and so on, as you have, or on the number on the screen there. So I'll try to incorporate your questions into the discussion, so please text away.
Hey!
So please, so we're also conscious that this is your lunch hour, so we're going to make sure that we're all done. A dramatic entrance. Welcome, Dick. Yeah. So we're conscious that this is your lunchtime, so that we will make sure that we're all done by about 1:15 or so that you can get back to an afternoon of productive labour. Now, I'd like to introduce our panellists before any further ado. Now, unfortunately, our first panellist, Salvatore Trimboli, is unable to be here today. On Monday afternoon, some other commitments came up, which meant he had to pull out of our discussions this week. However, we're very
privileged. You know about that in advance?
We could ask Greg about that. He didn't see it coming, unfortunately. But however, we're very
I could have seen that coming, and you didn't see it coming. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. As you can see, we're getting for a very lively discussion here today. But we're very privileged to have one of Salvatore's fellow contestants from the Channel 7 TV show The One, Greg Riley, to step up at late notice. Greg is a psychic medium, and he's actually done better than Salvatore in the final three of the show, of Channel 7 show The One, the search for Australia's most gifted psychic. And you can vote for him tonight so that if he can win, and we'll provide a number for you later so that you can vote for him. So please make Greg feel welcome. Now, our second panellist down the front here is a bit of a shy flower who is Dick Gross. Dick has written and broadcast from a godless perspective for over a decade, and he's the author of one of the age's most popular blogs, The Godless Gross. Dick is also the author of a brand new book on death, which was launched last night, and he's got some copies in the box there. So please make welcome Dick Gross. And our final panellist today is Ian Powell. Ian is a colleague of mine who works for the City Bible Forum, so please welcome Ian.
He got dudded. He didn't get the long introduction.
The less you know, the better.
I see.
Well, the catalyst for today's discussion was the recent Angels Demons Parade, which appeared here as part of the Melbourne Festival in Swanston Street. I'm not sure if anyone saw the big black sculptures that appeared down there. And as I was walking along looking at these sculptures, it prompted deeper questions. Are there really things, are angels and demons real, or a spiritual dimension? Is there really a spiritual dimension, an aspect which goes beyond the physical world? So I'd like to pose that question to our panellists today. So, are there really such things as angels and demons? Greg, do you want to kick us off?
Firstly, thank you everyone for inviting me over here. So it's not often we get to talk in such a wide forum. So thank you from Salvatore as well. So, but from my point of view, we'll talk about this before, is that I actually grew up a Catholic, so I actually have a faith that I do believe in angels and demons. So I came through that sort of belief structure and then sort of morphed into a medium in some way. So I just, from what I've experienced myself through my upbringing through, the Catholic religion, and what I've seen through my clients and connecting with people who have passed over, and how I feel that I've connected with my spiritual side, there are things that I suppose I do on a daily basis that confirm to me that there's something else out there, another dimension, another spiritual plane that we're not alone in. And I suppose from my point of view is I believe in God. I still believe in God. I believe in Jesus, and that's a foundation that will always stay with me. Mm-hmm. And I believe that spark of God is within us all, and we carry that with us. And he's calling right now.
So what's God going to say to you?
I better take his video.
The devil's looking for you.
God, okay, stop it.
I'm going to start dancing.
So I've come across experiences myself, and especially with the mediumship side of things, that having to prove to people that your father's coming through, and not saying that I was wishy-washy, was a nice guy, you used to like sport and all that kind of stuff. You come up with names, dates, places, and that's not random events a lot of the time. So my belief is only got stronger with what I've done, and I believe that there is, I suppose, good and evil on the other side. There's light and dark, and we're in a world of duality as well too. So from my point of view, I very, very strongly believe that there is a spiritual plane, and on the other side there are those angelic realms, but also there are those negative realms.
Sure, okay. What are your thoughts, Dick? Is there such thing as angels and demons, a spiritual dimension?
Well, I can't believe them. I can't believe in them. And I suppose you have to go back to my callow youth, where I was exposed to a lot of faiths, born Jewish, educated in an Anglican school, sang in a Catholic choir, friends who were Presbyterian and felt outsiders in a Catholic or Anglican environment. And from all of that I emerged unable to believe in things that don't have a cognitive track record. And by that I mean things that don't either present themselves to me as logical or believable or comprehensible. So what that means is that there's a whole array of beliefs that I'm disqualified from. Sometimes I think that's a bad thing. And if you look at all sorts of evidence, people who can believe are happier.
Right, so do you want to explain a bit more? So you say that there are some things you'd like to believe in, or you...
Sure, I'd like to believe in a God that cares. I'd like to believe in a God that loves, and I'd like to believe in a God that can intervene, particularly on my behalf. So I don't believe in a lot of those things, probably all of them. Having said that, I'm a pretty crap atheist, because I do say that atheism does fail to serve the human being in a number of ways. Unfortunately, that doesn't permit me then to say, well, you know, even though I don't believe, and even though belief would be, you know, quite manifestly good for me, I don't embrace belief. Now, if I were to embrace an array of beliefs, angels and demons would be the least credible of those beliefs. So that...
Why is that? Do you want to expand on why that is?
Well, I don't believe, there's that word again, I don't believe in a dichotomy between belief and unbelief. So don't say that, you know, here's all these credulous believers and here's all these incredibly insightful atheists, and there's two polarities. I believe that there's a continuum. And yes, at one end there are credulous believers who believe anything, and at the other end there are dogmatic atheists who repudiate everything. But in the middle, like, you know, I suspect, I haven't had time enough to talk to him, but I think I would meet Ian pretty close to the middle. And people in the middle are people with a very complicated view of God, with a very sophisticated view of God. I've got a friend of mine, a nun, Sister Marianne Confoy, who does a lot of contemplative meditation. When you speak to her about her God, I sort of don't understand it, to be frank, but it's not a superficial narrative. And I suspect that Marianne and I are very close in the middle, you know, and you've sort of unlocked a profound issue about, you know, what happens when you walk through a beautiful natural space. What do you think of creation and all that sort of thing? So you've unlocked something, and I know these people have only a very short time, and there are other speakers, but the bottom line is that I think that there are beliefs that are very close to my unbeliefs. I think that there are, and that angels and demons aren't part of them. I just think that they were a construct that came out of a very ancient people's stories. Those stories were written down. Because they were written down, they're still with us. But there's no evidence of angels and demons. I can see.
That's a good point. Now, maybe we'll bring you into the discussion here now, Ian. So Dick's suggesting there's no evidence for angels and demons and so on. How would you respond to that? Are there such things as angels and demons?
I don't. Yes. I think the question I want to say, I think what I want. The reason for the delay was I think the important question is one that's been brought up here, which is the question of how do you know and why do you believe what you believe? So that I believe in the devil. But my problem is when I use the word devil, angels, demons, because we're all brought up in a culture. There's a whole lot of pictures. They say that our brain's really an art, sort of an art gallery. That pictures are attached to those words, and most of what people think of as the devil and angels and demons operate. No, that's not what I mean. If you ask me about it, I believe, for example, in the reality of angels and the reality of the devil, because Jesus does. Because in the end, the question is how do you know anything about the unseen world? There are a number of ways you can, through all sorts of wonderful tools of science, we can see into all sorts of previously unseen worlds. Are there beings, personalities even, that are real but don't have bodies, like God, for example? And what is that God, he, she, it, they like? Well, I got persuaded. I was an atheist. Now, movements from atheism to God or from God to atheism or Buddhism to Muslim or something, they don't prove anything. They don't prove, because not everything is an evolutionary movement. Sometimes it's devolutionary. So I was an atheist. I got persuaded about Jesus after probably half a year's sort of examination. And I'm persuaded that he's not a liar when he makes the claim to be the light of the world. And that he speaks the truth about God, about what happens after death, about human nature, how to live, and very, very occasionally he touches on questions like the devil. And it's absolutely part of what Jesus believes in, but it's not at the heart of what he talks about, which is why I think we've got almost more questions than answers about it, because it's just not front and centre of what Jesus is on about, but it's obviously part of the world that he... So he says one or two things about the devil which I think are really important, but I do believe in what he means by angels and in the reality of evil as a personalised force, as well as just in our human anger and selfishness. But for me, the more important question is why would you believe? And I believe because I'm convinced he's not lying.
Okay. Maybe we could just go back a step to something that Dick was mentioning earlier. Maybe, Greg, you might be able to respond in terms of, say, your personal experience. You might expand a little bit about your experience of encountering the spiritual world and how that might counter what Dick's observation, there is no evidence for the spiritual world and so on. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit more about your own personal experience there?
So, now I'll go out on a limb. So, has anyone heard of a term called astral travel? I've done that. All right,
so do you want to explain what the there's only about three of us here
astral
have
travel
done that.
It's where your consciousness lifts up from your body and you sort of wake up and then you're looking down on your body in your bed and then you can move around in the other dimension to a certain extent. So that happens, like that's what we were talking about before about near-death experiences and stuff like that. So to me, that's my own personal experience, whether it was hallucinations or not. It was a time I was extremely relaxed and had woken up, and then I'd been trying for a while to actually attempt this because I've done a lot of, I suppose, training on how to actually understand things like that.
So where did you travel to?
Just around the house.
You didn't go anywhere interesting, like?
No, I come straight back to my body.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you do it now? Like, can you do it?
It's very, very difficult to do. Okay. Very difficult. And everyone has sleep paralysis when you wake up in the morning and you can't move your body. That's a perfect time to project yourself out of your body. So it's that's a little trick if you want to try it, but it's a very, very hard thing to do. And there are institutes that actually teach astral travel or that phenomenon around, but that's my only real personal experience I've had with being in another dimension, and that's part of the reason why I believe so strongly in what I do. I don't actually see physical spirits when I do mediumship readings. I clairvoyantly see them. But from a physical point of view, that's my reference point of, yes, there's another dimension.
There's another dimension, and you've kind of experienced it.
I experienced it at one point.
So when you do your clairvoyant readings, do you want to explain a little bit about what you actually see, how do you go about doing that? Because I don't know if anyone's watched the one TV show, but Greg, the thing that impressed me about the show was when Greg picked the guy in the boot of the car. Like, that was a very impressive moment. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and then maybe Dick can respond about how he responds to that.
Yeah, and for example, we use that as a perfect example. We were given a piece of clothing from the person in the boot of the car, and we were given the remote control of the car within the bag, so we couldn't see it was a Holden Astra. So as soon as I held that remote control, I just got the words in my own head, my own voice going, "It's a Holden Astra." So I basically went around the whole car park, looked at every Holden Astra, and then I got to a car within about 2 minutes where I thought, I'm here. I just got, once again, it's just that gut feeling that this is the car. So, and then all of a sudden, the thing on, in the back of the car it was. So it's a strange thing to explain, but it's a bit schizophrenic, because you've got your own head and your own voice and you're talking to yourself. But that's sort of how it works. And so it's a bit weird to explain, but it's a bit of feeling, it's a bit of seeing things. So it's like you're using imagination as well too. So if anyone here wants to imagine their house right now, and if you walk in the front door and what's on the left-hand side, what's on the right-hand side, you walk in there and there's your cat sitting on the bed. That's exactly what I use to do my reading. So that's the tools that we do use. But yeah.
And Dick, what's your response to that?
Well, utter incredulity. Like, I think.
So could you pick a boot, a guy in the boot of a car? Do you think, or?
Well, 9 out of 10 of the people on the one couldn't do either. I mean, the interesting thing about the one is how wrong a lot of the quintessence are.
Yes.
And the scary thing is, see, my view is that I have no objection to any belief or practice that consenting adults do in private. And by private I mean, within significant community organisations. What I do have difficulty with is when, people of faith try to impose that on the outer world or give it to the outer world. So when the Pope goes and has argued that use of prophylactics is wrong in a World Population Congress, I just think, given the AIDS crisis, that's wrong. And the same thing with these, with astral travel and all of these psychic stuff, when they sell to individual consumers, often people who are vulnerable and in desperation and with hope in their hearts and desperate to see anything to either be I think that people are vulnerable, and I think that there are real problems there.
I'd agree with that.
You've got to be very careful.
Yeah, you do, because when people come and see people like myself, they don't come and see us because they're happy. They are in a position where we can take advantage of them. So that's something that's, unfortunately, do hear of occasions where it does happen. So, but I do agree to a certain extent that does come about.
And just to exemplify that, I've actually written a musical about this very thing.
You can sing us a number, eh?
No. But, it was based on a faith healing in America, where a little 12-year-old girl had diabetes and her parents were jailed after failing in their attempt to cure her with prayer. But this just gets back. See, I can agree with Ian saying that, there's devil and angels. It all depends on how you construct those stories, whether you see them as analogies for real human attributes. That I can believe with, but if you see them as actual persons, or say the portrayal of from South Park of the devil from South Park with
He's good.
He's a good devil. Complicated. And, you know, that's a devil I can't believe in. And so, you know, I don't know to what extent Ian's construction is by way of human analogy or by way of actual personas. And secondly, with Greg's thing, you know, there's a number of medical materialist type explanations for astral travel, which we don't have to go into, but you can imagine them,
Yes.
you know.
Yep.
It's just 3D dreaming and all that sort of stuff. So we don't have to go into that. But to Greg, I would say I've got no objection to it so long as it doesn't, even though I don't believe in it, so long as it doesn't lead to the exploitation of the vulnerable. And to Ian, I say, well, actually, you know, I might agree with you, depending on how you construct those beliefs and describe them.
So what would convince you to change your mind about the existence of a spiritual kind of dimension or world?
Well, evidence sounds so dry.
It's not consistent with a purple jacket or something.
No, it's not. No, we can see the purple jacket, and it's actually cerise.
Sorry. I'm an infidel.
A colour infidel. So yeah, I mean, this is you know, every side has their downside, and the downside for atheism is that when you get down to it, a lot of our bottom lines are dull and dry and alienating and sort of inhuman in a way. But, you know, I'm looking and I can't get away from evidence. And, you know, the epistemology, the study of knowledge is just so complicated. You know, we know certain things. Why do we know certain things, and how do we get to know them? It's really interesting. You see it in the climate change debate now. You know, people embrace science. You know, we fly in a wobbly tin can a mile over the Earth on the basis of science, and yet when we don't like the answers, people will say, "Oh, science is wrong here and science is wrong there." It's not just climate change. So it's about knowledge, how we gain knowledge, how we accept knowledge, and why do we do it, and it's quite inconsistent, and it's quite.
Actually, there's a question that just come through which probably touches on that very issue. It says, what would you say is your bedrock or authority for knowing what you know? Greg says experience, Dick says reason, and Ian says a dead Jew.
A dead Jew.
He was dead for a little while.
So maybe Ian, maybe you could respond to that kind of
He was much older than me though when he died.
Your authority or the bedrock or authority for knowing what you know.
I mean, how, as Dick says, I think the undiscussed thing so often is this question of how do we know what we know, and how valid is what we know. I mean, I got to the question of my persuasion about Jesus through looking at history, which is a dull thing to look at. It's much easier to ask, or as the Da Vinci Code and many books like it, to throw dust in the air, and it's kind of fun, to actually say just blatant historical lies, than it is to prove that why historians don't believe it, because that's the gathering of bits of evidence that all point in one direction. I got persuaded about Jesus, having been a very happy atheist, on purely, this is why it'd be fun to talk with Dick further, because I got persuaded on the basis of evidence. I was angry when I got persuaded. I didn't want to be a Christian. So my persuasion is exactly not that Jesus is a dead Jew. If Jesus is a dead Jew, he's a liar, because he hangs very clearly, as he does, as do the early Christians. If Christ didn't rise from the dead, we are liars about God, and your faith is worthless. If he is just a dead Jew, and a great dead Jew, and there are many great dead Jews, he's worse than that. He's a filthy, disgusting liar, and I hate him, because thousands of people will die this year because of their conviction that he is who he says he is, and therefore they live in countries that will kill him for that. And if he is just a liar, I think he's a disgusting piece of work. But I was persuaded that he rose from the dead. Now, sitting here, it's hard to, I don't have the time, and it would be inappropriate for me to dictate, to take it to look at the bits of historical evidence that point that direction. But let me say, again and again, people who look at the evidence, who were happy atheists, get persuaded. If you don't look at the evidence, you'll find it unpersuasive. And you ought to. Dead people don't come back from the dead. And that's why it's significant, this one did. So that, yes, he is the bedrock, and that's why I believe in the devil as he portrays him. Although, it's quite, and I'm about to finish. It's quite clear, according to Jesus, that if the devil were to die today, I would sin tomorrow. So the Bible never suggests that the devil makes me do anything. He's never the excuse for my behaviour, but he's real, and his main weapon is lies.
So you're saying that there is a spiritual dimension to the world, and that's mediated through your understanding of Jesus.
He's my eyes, and he's the light of the world, and I believe when he says that, and he's the window. I believe because he believes it. If he's wrong, I'm wrong. I've also had a couple of supplementary experiences that make sense of it, but I would never base my belief on important things on some experiences that I've had.
So maybe Greg, so this kind of concept of how you know what you know, in your experience of the spiritual kind of when you have your meditations or you engage with things, is there an aspect of, you alluded to at the beginning, there's a duality, like of light and dark. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I think it also goes back to what we expand on the previous comment, is that also try and look at the scientific part of it. And they've done sort of research that if you get a glass of water and you freeze it and you put love on one and put hate on the other, and you put it under a microscope, and the actual crystals are different. Now, how do you explain that? And has been proven to occur. So I'm sort of, why I'm sort of saying, well, that's an unexplained thing you can do, and is if that happens under scientific conditions, what else is there out there? So I'm with it. It brings up more questions than answers. Actually,
we've got 5 minutes. We can answer them all.
Yeah.
in that time. Yeah. So
but the meditation stuff, it's just I find it's my connection with my source. I'm with God itself, that I can sit there and just connect with who I am as a being, and connect with, I suppose, the universal energy and God himself. And it's a very intimate feeling. It's a very intimate kind of connection, and it's a completeness that I suppose I know I'm here to have a mission in some way, but once I pass over, life is eternal. And that's just my belief and what I've sort of come across. So.
That's interesting. So you mentioned about mission. What about you, Dick? Do you think that you have a mission or a purpose?
Look, this gets back to the atheist view of meaning of life, and it's once again, pretty grim.
I like the Monty Python version myself.
Which is the meaning of life. Anyway, I wish there was an overarching meaning for which I had a role, but I just can't believe in it. And I construct the meaning of my life in a more terrestrial way, through my work, my family, my community. That's meaning for me. And I've got this totem pole of meanings. If I want to see myself as having meaning within the universe, I'm just another bag of genetic material walking around whose electric current suddenly ceases, and then I'm nothing. Well, there's no meaning there. If I look at my meaning on the planet, well, there's no meaning there. Even if I look at my meaning for Australia, well, Australia could really well do without me. No. And then you go down and down and down until finally you get meaning in your tribe.
Right. And meaning is kind of socially determined wherever you are.
Socially determined, and once again, that's not consoling. And people who have a deep and highly believed faith are often more happy than atheists like myself, and I think that the empirical evidence brings that out, that it makes you happier to have an underlying narrative of your meaning in the world.
So is there something that is attractive about what Greg or even Ian has that you kind of feel like you're missing or something?
Well, no, because I just can't be persuaded by the opening salvos of bedrock of belief. I just can't believe. Like Jesus. When I did my bar mitzvah, I was given a book of great Jews of history. Jesus was only number 4, which I thought was a bit mean. I thought it was a bit mean because even if you didn't believe in him, you'd have to say he was number 1.
Yes.
Jesus, you'd love to believe in him, although it's a bit difficult for a Jew because so many Jews have been killed in the name of Jesus. A lot of the Jewish community find it, the cross quite an offensive symbol. And so the Jewish view of history is not kind to Jesus. And that's the insuperable barrier. Even if I could believe, then I've got to get over my internal prejudice about that particular dead Jew. The thing about Jesus is that, he's also captured by his historians, for good and ill, His historians brought him to the world, but, his historians had an underlying predisposition to distinguish themselves from Jews, which led to 2,000 years of sad history for everyone, really. I mean, the poor old Copts in Egypt are copying it now. I'm glad you mentioned that because, people are dying for these beliefs, so they better bloody be right.
Well, we are running out of time, so I just want to maybe, if we could just recap or just summarise. So I think we've had a very interesting kind of discussion of various different perspectives, but just, so I suppose we can think about, as a final thought, any advances. So has today changed, or is there any other aspect of the spiritual world that I'll start again.
Can I just rudely interrupt?
Yes, you can. Yes, so I'm just trying to work out which line to go for. Yeah.
We're too old to change, aren't we? It's very hard. It's interesting that you changed. You changed once, and it was
But I was 19, so yes, I think I'm aware now. Up until about 10 years ago, I would think I used to be able to happily say, you bring me evidence, and I'm not asking, just bring me good evidence it isn't true, I'm out of here. I can earn money maybe and get a house, rather than being a minister. It's a waste of time if it's not true. But I'm aware in the last couple of years when I just realised how Christianity accidentally, and it is kind of accidentally, answers all the deepest questions that physics has and that philosophy has, and I just think it'd be a shame if it wasn't true. So I'm more sort of emotionally, but I would like to think I would be willing to, if I'm not willing to change, I'm dishonouring the God who tells us to follow the truth. And people like Anthony Flew, and again I'm reluctant in the sense to bring up because it sounds like cheap point scoring, the outstanding atheist in the last third of the 20th century who was, was in a 2-day debate with academics who halfway through says the debate's over, I'm now convinced there's a God. Now he didn't become a Christian. He died fairly soon after that, but what got him was the evidence. He'd always been a remarkably consistent philosopher who'd always said, you've got to go where the evidence goes. So it's kind of encouraging for humankind that a man like him, having held the position he held, was willing to change. And unlike what Richard Dawkins says, attacked him, an old man trying to get a bed in case he's wrong when he dies, he didn't believe there was life after death. And he said Richard Dawkins knew that. So that I think
that's a misrepresentation.
It was a deliberate. It was an ignorant lie. But Anthony Flew simply felt the evidence pushed him to say that it made more sense to believe there was an intelligence.
I actually understand that. I actually understand that. But if the notion of God is somehow melded, not in the Old Testament or even the New Testament God, but if the notion of God is somehow melded into a notion of maths and science, and it all suddenly made sense. And I don't understand maths and science, but it all suddenly made sense. I'd be happy to make what I consider to be a very short journey to that notion of God. I completely understand where Flew why flew the coop. And I get that.
But I'm just saying, I think I would like to think that humans, some will have enough integrity to say, gee, the evidence.
Yeah.
I've had a
but
public
aren't we
standing
too
here.
old? Aren't we too old?
I think if we got to face the fact it's harder. It is.
Yeah.
If we don't face the fact it's hard to change, we're probably in denial because it is hard to change.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be buggered, after being godless gross for all this time. And I suddenly embraced, God. But I'm happy to embrace that sort of God, but it's not.
Yeah. Just
the people who have the ability to do that. I've actually met quite a number of physicists and mathematicians who are Christians, and I've asked them to try and explain it to me, and they meld their deep understanding of maths and physics with their belief in Jesus. And what's that astronomer from Cambridge? You must know.
Yeah, I know the Polkinghorne.
Polkinghorne. So, people like that. And, I've actually met the man and, I was hoping to. So I'm happy to try and get there, but it's just...
I think maybe we should just finish with the youngest man on the panel. Greg, do you just want to make any comments about...
old and world weary.
About this notion of the spiritual reality and evidence and so on. Do you want to make a final comment or reflection?
I think it's very much an individual journey as well too. And I found for me it's a very personal journey, and what you find is your own truth, and your search for truth is something that obviously Ian and I can sort of assist with, but in the end it's a personal journey you have to find out for yourself, and only through you we actually understand, is there a spiritual plane? None of us are going to give you the physical evidence. For me, I found it was my own journey, and I think for most people here, it's again an individual journey for that to happen. So we can take you to drink water, but you need to put your head in. So
Terrific. Please, thank you, our panelists.